welcome to this conversation. Those of you who don't know me, and those of you who do, I apologise for boring you rigid with a brief introduction. I'm Steve Hearson. I'm a consultant, a executive coach, and a supervisor and writer. I will leave it there because you can always stalk and find me on LinkedIn and elsewhere, other than to say that what you are joining is one of what's the right word? A sporadic and occasional series of events that I run, which are framed as chewy conversations. I've chosen over the last few years not to do podcasts or to run a podcast myself because I much prefer an inquiry with a number of people. And this is a way in which I can invite people to come together and we can get into some inquiry into some of the issues and questions that we all face in organizations in our working lives, with no expectations that there's going to be necessarily an easy answer, because the things we talk about typically don't have them. I'm joined today by Charleen Johnson, who's over in Canada, and Ket Patel, who's in London. I've also just made a choice that I'm not going to spotlight us three, because that feels to me placing us in a hierarchical position, as if somehow our words are more significant and important. And I don't know about you two, but I don't feel that my words are any more important than anybody else's. So if you want to know which one of us is speaking, just scan the faces and find us. So I hope that's okay with the rest of you. Charleen, would you just care briefly to introduce yourself?
Okay, so hi everyone. Really excited to be here today and partnering with Ket and Steve. And yes, I've born and raised in the Vancouver, BC, been a consultant, external as well as internal consultant in a variety of different industries, over 25 years, I would say, and worked in the US as well as in New Zealand. And as an organization development practitioner and done the full scope of work as an HR generalist, director, that
So
type
you're
of
the
thing.
mechanic
So,
and you're Sophia's father. At least you're not pretending you don't know who I am.
okay, that's it. Thank you.
Did you plan that, Steve?
No, not at all. Carry on, Charleen.
I'm not sure if there's that much more to add other than
Okay.
I have a company called InSpark Group, and I produced an interesting report this last year called the 2026 Workplace Absurdities Report, which is the way I first connected with Ket and into us working together.
Brilliant. Thanks, Charleen. Ket.
Hello. So I am a change consultant, whatever people want to make of that title. I have been volunteering and supporting organizations in exploring what change means for them in various guises over a number of years. The thing that's always drawn me to being involved is sort of the tension that most organizations place on their people, why it shows up, what you can do to alleviate some of it, and all of the dynamics that surround it. And I just find it very curious. And I guess one of the reasons I find it so curious is actually what it's done for you. So as a consultant myself, going into organizations and feeling their tensions and then my own as I sort of try to intertwine myself with them and support and help them move in a direction they want, it actually has its own effect on you. So
Exactly
I
who you
started
are,
exploring
Good.
this.
This is where you work? Yes. Every day? Every day. Then you should know
Okay.
better. Know what? That my
Where
daughter
on earth-
doesn't belong here. Sophia decides where she belongs.
Where
You
is
really
that?
think this is a joke?
This is
No, sir.
There we go. I think I found it. There we go. Yeah.
This is the most absurd start to a webinar I've ever been on.
There we
Thanks.
go.
This
It's
is
happening.
This is incredible. This is incredible.
Brilliant,
So
isn't
yeah,
it?
stuff like this, as you can see, doesn't tend to faze me. Just take a moment and step back and maybe look at what's going on. But yeah, I guess look, I'm really interested in this topic. I've probably got a real desire to create a space, much like Steve and Charleen, for us to have conversations around what it means to be in the middle of these things we observe when we're in organizations trying to help them change. So yeah.
Lovely. So this is what's going to happen, folks. To give you a framing, we're running till 4:30. If you want to leave before then, you're not tethered, but we'd love to have you with us to the end. This is our frame. The context is absurdity at work. And a wee bit of admin. I'm just whilst people are talking, when you're not talking, if you could have your mics off, that'd be great. It'd be lovely to have your cameras on, as I've said, and equally, if you have reasons why you can't, that's fine. If you can, raise your hands to speak when the opportunity arises, or throw a passing small child or family pet at the screen to raise our awareness that you want to talk. And we're recording. In terms of contracting for how we work together, I'm going to hold this quite lightly, in the sense that I invite you just to take responsibility for how you show up, and to treat each other as you would wish to be treated yourself. And we will just, if we need to contract around anything specifically as we go, then let's do that. Okay, but we're all adults, so I'm going to assume that we can do that well together. A wee bit of tilling of the soil. So these are some lovely questions that Charleen offered. Charleen, would you like to do this, actually, since it's your thing?
Sure. So I just had a session yesterday at the Dev conference, and we were talking about absurdity patterns that show up in organizations, and dove pretty quickly right into, okay, how is this showing up for everyone in your work, whether you're inside an organization or external. So inviting people to think of an absurd scenario, and maybe I could define absurdity just a little bit here. So absurdity is, for example, just looking at contradictions that are happening in the workplace. So being told to do one thing, and then what's happening is another, different expectations that are happening, you're getting pulled in different directions. The use of irony, humor, cynicism, hesitation during meetings, workarounds, and decisions just that never get dissolved or resolved. So that's a little bit of a definition. So think of some kind of absurdities that are happening in your workplace, perhaps in a meeting or a specific interaction that you've had over the last few weeks, and maybe just share in the chat 3 sentences to describe it. So what did you observe? And name the pattern in your own words. What is the function that the absurdity is serving? So this is something that might be interesting to explore a bit today. What's the function of that absurdity, that dynamic happening? And what is the cost of that for individuals and the organization? So we had about 5 minutes or so, just taking some time to think about a scenario, and put that into the chat when you're ready. We'll unpack.
I'll put those questions in the slide as well. Sorry, in the chat. Got them. Cheryl, welcome. You join us at the moment where, I don't know whether you can see the chat and see what I've dropped in there, but there's an invitation just to, in the chat, think of your responses to the 3 questions you can see in the chat. If you can't see them because you can't see the history in the chat, I will repost them. So just let me know if you're wondering why we're sitting in silence. Ah, here they come.
Yes. Lots of rich examples, which will be interesting to unpack.
Be lovely to have some more. Ah, Sarah, that's a lovely one. I almost feel moved to say that it's a very common one.
Yeah. Yes.
And as these come in, thanks, Jeff. Well, I'm sure you've seen plenty of absurd things. As these come in, just notice how they land with you. What's your response to them? As other people's come in, you go, oh my goodness me, that's familiar. I've seen that. Do you feel frustrated? Angry even? Yeah, Nicole, lovely one. Written papers. How many of you have seen vast PowerPoint slides with endless words? Some of you will have heard me say this before, that for me, PowerPoint presentation is simply a container for anxiety. The longer the slide deck, the more detail, the more anxiety it's containing. Okay. So keep those coming in. It'd be nice, you know, that those who are quiet in the background, feel free to add to those. We'll share the chat afterwards. And I think there's something here about fueling our awareness of absurdity. And the more that people like us go out into and do our work and are able to not just spot the contradictions and absurdities, but shine a light on them to invite our colleagues and our peers and our clients into inquiry about them, the better. Oh, thanks, Lewis. Nice. Okay. Yeah. Yes, us consultants, particularly those from large consultancies, bear a lot of responsibility for absurdity, I suspect, in organizations. So I'm just going to give you a very brief framing for the menu. There's three things happening. Me, Ket, and Charleen are going to have a shortish conversation where we just have a few questions we're going to chew on, not because we have the answers or are geniuses in this field, but because we want to provide some useful provocation for you. And then we're going to go into, I hope we'll have time for 2 cycles of inquiry. And I'll put you into some small groups and you'll have a chance to have some conversations. And we've got 3 or 4 questions just to spark your conversations and invite you into that deeper inquiry. And of course, you're free to take that where you want to. And between after each inquiry, we'll have some plenary to see what sense we're making of it. So that's the plan. So if we begin with us 3, and we go to the questions we were sharing recently, I guess my question for the 2 of you is, why is this question of absurdity in all organizations important? I mean, we could construe this as being something we use as a throwaway comment in life and in our families. That's just absurd. Why should we even take this seriously?
Oh God, where to start? I think we should take it seriously because for a lot of people, they don't realize it affects their practice. Like you carry the absurdity. Okay, I speak for myself. And one of the reasons this is sort of more aware to me than it was perhaps this time last year was that I was in a situation that for once in my life with a client, I genuinely had no idea what I was meant to do because I'd gone in and I was caught between 2 or 3 different quite senior people, all very, I would say now, anxiety filled about what they were asked to do and when they needed to be done by and how much time they had to convey that to me, who they saw as someone who would solve lots of problems. And so I didn't really quite appreciate these dynamics that I was putting myself in and carried the weight of that for a number of weeks trying to make sense of it. And so for me, the absurdity is what effect does it have on individuals' performance in organizations that it is actually just unfair, right? Because we just don't realize the dynamics at play. We don't understand what's going on. We don't see that some of it is us and some of it is them. And so that for me is why it's kind of really interesting is people going into organizations, people supporting people through change.
Got it.
Is that it's the balance of the impact on yourself.
Lovely. Charleen, what would you add to
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I would agree with that, and to build on it, when what I noticed is that the workplace seems to be the absurdity seems to be accelerating. When I came back to Canada in 2022 from New Zealand, I had noticed just a acceleration of the split expectations required, being asked to be strategic, but then being caught into the weeds. How am I supposed to do both? How am I supposed to be building relationships with people and connecting if I'm in meetings, back-to-back meetings, day to day? So it just seemed to get more and more bizarre. And it got me entering into why is this important? So why is it getting so difficult to navigate work? And with capable people in it. And these organizations, it looks like we're actually getting things accomplished. We're ticking through our reports, and everything's looking green on our status reports. We're creating strategies that seem to be fairly cohesive, but then there's this underlying sort of shadow effect not being addressed half the time, and is happening, and it actually impacts employee engagement. What I noticed, and disengagement, and not getting things done, and it's costing a lot of money. Rework again. So I think there's real implications for organizations and leaders in effectiveness, the cost of things, and people using their talent. There's direct implications there, and I think what we're seeing now, and for me personally, is just how do we address it? What do we need to do differently? So got really connected into doing some research around what that might look like under the hood, and it wasn't about individual performance. When I took a look at it, it's really about the broader system, and so that's the lens I come with.
Lovely. I suppose the bit I would add to that is my interest in this comes from a lifelong love of Warner Brothers cartoons, as well as the world of work. When I wrote my book, No Silver Bullet, for me, there is something both terrifying, but the literal definition of absurdity in human beings in organizations, particularly senior leaders, desperately looking for a guaranteed answer to a complex problem and being prepared to pay a fortune for that. And the figure that springs to mind is the one story that I put in there that has a hard number. It's over $600 million. $600 million cost of actually chasing something that's absurd. But there's also another part of this, which is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this book, James Healy's lovely book, BS at Work. And there's one story in it that to me kind of cuts across both the absurdity and the existential anxiety and terror that absurdity somehow rather spans, where he describes how organizations invest a lot of time and money in handbooks. And he describes this case of one organization that has a staff handbook of over 1,000 pages. So if you just pause for a moment, consider that for a moment, that if each of you were to join a new employer and you were handed a 1,000-page new handbook, how long that would take you to read? And they kind of ran the numbers and did a rough estimate of how long it would take. It's a long time. Now, credit to this organization, what they did was they shredded it. They shredded it and rewrote it and came up with something substantially pithier. But the reasons why organizations end up with over 1,000-page handbooks goes to the heart, I suspect, of the impact of anxiety and the absurdity it creates. Which leads me in a sense to my next question, which is, and if I start with you this time, Charleen, we've heard some examples, but I'm interested, having read your report, if you had to distill down into some of the key signs or tells of how absurdity shows up in the world of work and organizational life? If you were, a traveler in the foreign land of organizations on safari, what might you be noticing? Yeah.
Yes. And that's where I've come to in the work, is really thinking about absurdity. It's neutral. There's not something necessarily good or bad about it, but think about it as a signal. Signal for what? Signal for what? So taking a look at under the hood, and so there's how it can show up. I've created a bit what I call it an absurdity pattern library, and four ways it can show up. Just four common ones is one I call a coordination illusion, where it looks like we're in a meeting, everyone's agreed, but they actually haven't. And then outside of the meeting, because they've all left with a different understanding, and then they've come to understanding, they have different mental models. So it looks like things are getting accomplished and aligned, and they're not. There's loops that are happening, continuous work, that the agenda item keeps showing up over and over again in meetings. You might have seen this happen. That's a sign. Why is it not getting completed? What's going on here? Why does it keep looping? When people are avoiding escalating issues, everybody knows it's actually needs to get escalated up an issue or topic, but it doesn't. And there's risks associated with speaking up and moving some of these things forward as well too. And then the other area that we've probably seen a fair bit is around performance theater, acting like we're getting a lot of work done, looking like we are, but we're not actually at times, and thinking that we're being strategic. We've got the plan, we've got the strategy, but we're not actually fully executing to it. It doesn't work. So I've named just a couple of core patterns and different ways that it can show up, but this shows up in so many different ways, consciously or unconsciously. Intentionally, some people are using these dynamics for whatever reasons, and you've mentioned some of them in your examples, but unintentionally too. And there's some blind spots, perhaps, I'm thinking around this, and what is our role then in that?
Lovely. And what is our role in that? I think we're going to come back to in the small groups as well. Ket, any reflections to build on that? If you were on safari?
I think it's that low level frustration you spot in just the average employee, their kind of disconnectedness from what's going on around them, kind of futility of it all. I think there are just these sort of emotional observations you pick on people that are kind of like, I'm tired of this. And it actually goes to the point Charleen was making, is the volume of this stuff feels like it is increasing, and people are checking out because it feels futile to try and do anything. So there's definitely just the demeanor in which people show up, the kind of frivolity or lack of it, I think is some real signs of whether people are really there at all in mind.
Right. So I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to ask, but we're going to segue quite quickly into some small group work, small group inquiry, for the simple reason it's boiling hot. And if I don't get you into small groups talking, then David will have to go and get another ice cream, and you will all fall asleep. So I've got one question I want to just ask you two, but I want to invite the rest of you to consider for a moment. How comfortable or aware of your own absurdity are you two?
Oh, it's about my absurdity. It's not about other people's.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is when I was writing the report, I started to think, I've been kind of complicit myself as a practitioner with good intention, really, of trying to help things along, maybe at times, especially as an internal leader, trying to buffer the absurdities, the system, the silliness that may be happening and disconnects. But I was being a bit complicit at times, and I'm like, and so really thinking about my role in that, and looking at it quite differently now. But it was a bit of an aha scenario, and for good intention. I mean, it's I think we're all trying our best, right?
Okay. So awareness of your own complicity, Ket?
Yes.
Yeah, I think a similar Well, as you both know, and others will find out, right? Like the idea that this could benefit running some sort of big, face-to-face meetup, and that wouldn't that be a great thing to do? And I got carried away with the idea more than the execution of the idea, and massively underplayed all the elements that are required to make something as important and useful actually come together. And then, so on reflection, I just waved off so many hurdles. Like, don't worry, we'll figure it out, and it will happen, and build it, and they will come. Told myself so many stories. So I think we're all susceptible to having our own absurdities, right? It's noticing
So
what they do for you.
so I'm wondering, partly through what you say, Ket, and some of the stories in the chat, that ego has a role in this. That the more ego there is, the more likelihood is we're going to reach and stretch for something that is way bigger than we can achieve. My own relationship with absurdity is best summed up by the fact that I share an office with my lovely wife, and on more than one occasion, I've come off a call with clients, or I've been doing a webinar like this, and she waits until the line has dropped, and then she collapses in hysterics and will exclaim something like, "God, you talk a lot of rubbish." And in those moments, I'm faced with my own absurdity that, I may think I sound quite clever and rational and maybe occasionally a bit intellectual, but I am grounded very quickly by my family, who I know too, in no doubt as to how absurd I am. So the question I want to leave hanging in the air before I get you all into small groups is one that we're going to come back to at the end, because I don't want us to be talking about absurdity. This is my desire, as this kind of abstract thing. We've thingified absurdity, and it sits over there, and we prod and poke it from afar. You are all, at least many of you I know, are practitioners, and you are consultants, you're leaders, or in Lewis's case, recently retired and enjoying the luxury of no longer having to deal with this mess, former leader. So the question is, in the context of practice, whatever yours is, how do you respond? How do you respond when you meet it, whatever it is? How do you respond to the patterns of absurdity that Charleen talks about so eloquently? So that's the kind of hanging question. And I'm now going to offer you these questions to fuel some small group inquiry. And these are your questions. What's coming up for you in response to what you've heard so far? The only reason the three of us were talking was to kind of provide you with some stuff to rub up against, to either agree with or disagree with. What are you noticing about your own relationship to or with absurdity in all its forms? What questions arise, and what else? What else? Okay, this is simply a starting point for you in that inquiry. By all means, take a picture, and I'll drop those in the chat. I'm going to assign you all randomly into groups. Those of you who are not on camera, I'm going to assume you're still with us. If you find yourself in rooms where you are with three people who are not talking, then come back to the main room and I will relocate you. But I'm going to put up 5 breakout rooms, so hopefully that will give us enough diversity. There we go. All right. Any questions before I send you all off? No? Just put the questions in the chat. And I'm going to give you probably just over 15 minutes. Okay. Over to you. Rooms are open now. Welcome back.
Hi.
Okay, everybody back. So let's have a wee bit of whole group discussion. Put your hand up or throw passing animal at screen. It'd be lovely to hear from the different groups what you were talking about.
Okay, since no one is talking, one of the things we came up with is that misuse of language can frequently be the start of a lot of absurdity. It allows people to obscure meaning or avoid addressing issues when they should be more adult and actually face up to what's going on.
Can you say a bit more what you mean by misuse of language, Lewis?
Okay, I'll give you my favorite example. People talk about strategies.
Yeah.
A strategy is a way of achieving something. People never talk about goals, which is what you want to achieve. A number of times I've been leading a team and they've come in and said, this is our strategy. And I go, to achieve what? And they look at me and which planet did you come from? And then we have to have a long discussion about why we do things as opposed to how we do things. And if you don't know why you're doing something, what you're trying to achieve, there's no point in discussing what you're going to do. Unfortunately, discussing what you're going to do is much easier. It's concrete. I can go out here, we made a decision. I'm going to get fitter. I'm going to run 100 meters 10 times a day or something like that. But why do you need to get fitter? No one discussed that.
So this is strategy as a comforter.
Strategy is an avoidance of taking decisions and doing something sensible. And I don't think it's giving you any comfort. Some of the strategies people come up with are horrendous.
Nice. Thanks, Lewis. Others?
I was going to say on the reasons it shows up. We talked about the pressure to do, like, there's someone's always setting some arbitrary time in which something needs to get done, and the more we have to get done in a short space of time, the more absurdity starts to appear because there's a conflict in what's important. And the other thing we spoke about, which I really invite the group to come and sort of share reflections on, is whether absurdity is I know you said this, Charlene, we don't need to think of it as Charlene, as a negative, but it is labeling even at what goes on, what we observe as absurd, really helpful when we're talking to others, or is it really just how do we create that awareness of whether this is interesting or not to look at, to pause and look at?
Thanks, Ket. Nina?
One thing that came up for me, and actually, Ket, I think this gets to the answer, is that it's helpful to the extent that it can help people who are internalizing it and think that it's them. So, that my work friends that I commiserate with, we're all clear for the most part, like it's not me, it's the system, or I've been asked to do something absurd, but I do have colleagues and friends at work that think that they are wrong or not getting it, or that they're failing or something, and they just have to work harder. And so for me, naming the absurdity is to try and help them to stop internalizing this.
If I might just come back on that, that was actually kind of like one of the reasons it's interesting to me now is you start to see people who aren't like us, who kind of can slow down and notice, who start to internalize it more and start to feel that pressure and start to doubt themselves. And that is happening on a much wider scale than just for people like us that go into organizations. It's happening to the average employee. So yeah,
So
I kind of go for it, Steve. Sorry.
So just before we come to you, Nicole, I'm going to frame this as a question. To what extent is self-doubt essential to appreciating absurdity? If you have no self-doubt, can you actually see absurdity in yourself and others? It's just a thought I've had.
Could I challenge that, Steve, and say, is absurdity an outcome of self-doubt or an output of it?
Could be. May not be, maybe. Yeah. Nicole, you had your hand up, then it vanished again.
Well, I recognised it had been clocked. I suppose the thing about it just got me thinking about difference, actually, and how much in a system that is, or I don't know, the language of it, the intention of it, or the, I don't know, the routines of absurdity. When you come into almost hold a mirror up, you kind of reflect it. You can be seen as absurd yourself. So like the antidote. So one of the stories I told in the small group was my exec director apparently is fed up of reading papers, 40 papers to read, don't understand, kind of gets into cognitive overload. I said to my boss, I wonder what would happen if there were 40 conversations rather than 40 papers, and the additional value that 40 conversations would create. And my boss made some comment about, well, we've got governance. Yeah. So there's something about an alternative coming in, to call out the absurdity, which in itself is seen as absurd. How could you possibly do that? Because we've got governance to think about. And I suppose in this moment, I've kind of gone to what I notice about linear thinking in organizations, this desperate, almost holding the line. Even the language of holding the line seems endemic. So can't shift something. Anyway, I'm starting to kind of just think out loud here. I'll shush.
No, that's it. Well, no, I think that was really helpful. So I immediately go to the emperor who wears no clothes. The young child who calls out the emperor's wearing no clothes is first castigated for his childishness and his temerity to do so. You're wrong. And I'm reminded of a story a consultant told me years ago. This was at a point in the UK where we were beginning to move in the NHS towards having large call centres to handle, for example, people phoning up to book blood tests or to get test results, the outsourcing of things that would otherwise be handled in GPs or in hospitals. And this consultant was working in one of the call centres, and he simply constructed a spreadsheet where he worked out that if you ran the numbers on the number of people with each of the medical conditions, the number of times they would likely need to call in a year, the number of telephone lines and the number of operators they had, it simply didn't stack up. I mean, by an order of considerable magnitude. And he said to me that no matter who he spoke to, all the way to the most senior levels in the organization, nobody could face this. And the next thing I remember hearing was that the entire operation was closed down because they couldn't deliver it. And that to me is a lovely example of how this bites. So I'm going to invite you into another conversation with a slightly different set of questions. But before we do that, I'm just going to read this because one of the things we haven't done is given a clear definition. I found this on the interweb. This is actually from a primer via Oxford University's wonderful public access material. And I'll just quote this. Quote, absurdism is founded on the belief that we live in a chaotic, purposeless universe and human existence has no inherent meaning. Despite this, humans still try to find or create meaning. The paradox produces the absurd. Unquote. I just find that quite rich when we think about what we've been talking about.
Well, and here's the question. What if we think of absurdity as really, when we think of organizations and complex systems, it's emergence. It's emergence. It's the nature of life, right? We have disturbances that come in. We have self-organization happening. So it's just it's another form of that. It's a signal for that underplay in organizations. So that's another way to think about it too. That's that I've come to thinking about, and it's embedded in some of my papers and work. Yeah.
And I was going to like the idea of emergence is uncomfortable. Is our absolute hatred of things emergent unpredictably for us that is the absurdity, the need to deal with that.
Control. And then we need a plan and we need to, you know, hack it back. I mean, somebody yesterday in a session said that, use the word hack it back. We need we need to get this thing under control so we have certainty. You know, we don't like uncertainty, and it's a lot of uncertainty right now. So, you know, socially, economically, everything. So it seems like to me that's part of a catalyst for the acceleration of it and how that trickles down into our psyche as well as individuals at work and teams too. And some thinking on that.
To build on that, here's some questions to prompt you for the next conversation. And this is kind of shuffling into the now what, sorry, the so what and the now what. So what are the implications of this conversation, if any, for your practice? How do we ensure this isn't just another intellectual academic hour and a half of pontificating? What might the implications be for your clients? What might you need to attend to? And I use the word attend very deliberately because the attending might be something to do with your own relationship with not knowing. Attending to your own relationship maybe with mortality, ultimately, take the fully existentialist position. And how might you actually respond the next time that you face a contradiction or absurdity? And that question is more acute, I'm going to delicately suggest, for those of you who are internals. So I happen to be looking at you, Nicole. You are an internal. There's a difference between me or Ket, Hilary, Charlie, meeting something in an organization. The jeopardy for us is slightly different. But for the internal to play the role of the boy pointing out that somebody is wearing no clothes is a totally different proposition. Okay. So I've mixed up the groups so you get to a little bit like speed dating, but not clearly. But so you get to meet some different people. Is this kind of intellectual dating, intellectual speed dating? I'm not quite sure what the metaphor is, but you get the idea. This is just to give you a different experience. Okay, rooms are open.
Okay, thank you. All right. And then the week prep for next week.
Oh, that ended too quick.
Always does.
Ket was about to answer all of our questions then.
Sarah killed it.
Sarah killed it. Don't blame me, Ket.
No, not killed it. I mean, as in you. It was a good.
Oh,
God,
sorry.
Yeah, so yeah, you nailed it.
Sorry.
I don't know if that's even better anymore.
Thank you so much. Yeah, please love Kathleen. Thank you.
Oh, missed that. All right.
Can everyone else hear Steve?
No.
No.
Sorry,
So,
my camera.
oh,
Sorry,
there we
beg your
go.
pardon.
I thought this was the
That's
meditation.
okay.
I thought this was.
I thought we were doing a little timeout. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you for that. I would have happily sat here in calm and quiet. So, fruits of your conversations. Thanks for saying that. What did you discuss? What's worth sharing in the plenary?
Well, I was with Nina and Lewis, and it was a very interesting conversation because I learned some new expressions. Competing religions. And I've asked to borrow these, so I will be taking full advantage. And then hippo, which rang all sorts of bells.
I paid person's opinion.
Yeah. And that made a lot of things make sense. So I'm definitely snatching that one.
Excellent. What else?
on one of the conclusions. We didn't actually come to it, but we discussed it as a possibility. Is the more education you've got, actually, the more you're likely to resort to absurdity, which sounds really stupid, but it's true.
Well, that's interesting. So where I immediately jumped to, Hilary, was I was doing a session recently with a group of what I would describe as very accomplished, very intellectual practitioners. And I was really struck by how, so when I do talk sometimes, I hate the term keynotes. One of the things I occasionally do is I run a competition. And I ask people to come up with their own thought leader, guru-like couplet, like a Simon Sinek. You know, if leaders do this, then their people will do that. And I did it with the NHS. And without using AI, because I give people permission to use AI, these people from the NHS came up with some corking, satirical couplets that talk to the absurdity of their experience of organizations and the absurdity of thought leadership. The group of really bright, really intelligent practitioners were hamstrung by their intellects. They seemed to be unable to free themselves up just to inhabit the absurdity of their experience of their work and their organizations, because these were all internal practitioners from a particular sector. And it really struck me. So if I put it like this, so some of you I know have differing levels of experience with different communities of practice. So Ket, you with the Change Management Institute, me and some others with the Organizational Development Network Europe. I guess my question is, when we go into our tribes of practice, the fields, and you get together the people who all identify as similar, how easy is it for people to embrace their absurdity when they're amongst their skilled peers? I mean, Hilary, you and I hang out at the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. I don't experience that much frivolity of the absurd sort when we go there.
Perhaps it shows up differently and we've not noticed it yet.
Maybe it does. Sarah?
Yeah, I was going to say, I wouldn't like just similar to what Hilary's just said is actually when you're kind of with your people. I mean, I sort of look at sometimes the OD stuff as when I'm in a like-minded group of people, it's like I can kind of get my geek on, like with some of the OD stuff that I couldn't just ordinarily, like have my way with like organisation, because it just wouldn't stick or it wouldn't fly and people go, what are you talking about? But I just wonder if like you just actually wouldn't recognise it as that because like you're all sort of in the same space, so you probably wouldn't name it in that way potentially.
One of the most fun experiences I ever had was we had a family therapist come and talk to a bunch of consultants who were in organizational learning. This was Peter Sengi's team in the States. And this guy said, okay, there's only one rule for the meeting today, folks. You're not allowed to say anything if you've ever thought it before.
Nice.
And you have never seen a room full of so many people who were so distressed, literally sitting on their hands. Super smart consultants sitting on their hands because they weren't allowed to say something if they'd ever thought it before. And I ended up sitting there and all of a sudden I had the thought, if I had a thought that I'd not had before, I'd be allowed to say it. Hey, that's a thought I've never had before. And I suddenly burst out in this kind of Zen-like laughter, and all these other folks are sitting around on their hands looking at me as if I'm some sort of alien who's come from the planet Zard. But if you're ever with a group of people who are really, really smart, it's a great way to get them engaged, is to tell them you're not allowed to say something if you've ever thought it before.
I love that.
How would anyone know?
Yeah, mental gymnastics there.
Well, what's happening is something's happening and you're going, oh, I've got a good story about that. Or I remember that situation. Or I did that. Or yeah, okay. Yeah, no. So it's like you're not allowed to emit that from your oral orifice.
But how would anyone know? Because assuming we're not telepathic yet, no one would know.
It's for the individuals themselves to self-police. I mean, this is an organizational learning community, a group of people who spend their lives doing this sort of stuff. And so they're, You know, they tend to be used to following instructions to some degree.
Mm.
So
I mean, yes, you could lie and say, "Oh, yeah, I've just had a thought that I've never had before," but you know, kind of people kind of know that, don't they? They pick up on the vibe, and
It's like a game of would I lie to you?
So I'm just interested, before we finish, and we just have one housekeeping thing to do before we leave. Did anybody have a sense of, so how are you going to respond next time you stumble across this stuff? Or what are you going to do with your, you know, how does this influence your practice? Any reflections on that?
I think try not to laugh.
It's a very polite.
I'd have said to try and laugh.
Good point.
No, I certainly have laughed when people have put a post-it note on a wall that says "Change the culture" with my initials on the corner. I stood, looked down the line, and I looked, and I started to smile, and people started to smile, and then the smile got a bit broader, and I said, "I'm clear about why I'm smiling. I'm curious to know why you are." And then somebody said, "That's ridiculous, isn't it?" I said, "Go on, what's ridiculous? That you can change the culture?" And it goes, "Oh, right, okay, we're on the same page." So we went and had a conversation about it. So yes, laughing in that context, I wouldn't, but I'd make a call on it, I guess.
So I feel that there's only one way I can end this, which is, I don't know if any of you heard the story, but I think it's true. Salvador Dali, the famous surrealist painter, apparently, when he was depressed and down, would go out into the streets and he'd sit somewhere and he would imagine small owls, I can't remember which breed, upside down, embedded in small piles of poo on top of bus shelters or policemen's helmets or, you know, or windowsills. And people would say to him, "Salvador, why are you laughing?" And he would just go, "It's the owls. Can't you see the owls?" You know, he was just lost in his own wonderful world of make-believe and absurdity. And I can't think of a finer way than to leave you with that image. And the next time you meet absurdity in a strategy meeting or at work or with one of your clients, and it's absurd, just imagine a small owl or maybe a furry mammal of your choice embedded in something rather smelly on top of that person's head or their monitor. It might change things, who knows? Owl-based OD, it's the future. Those of you who are organisational.
Look forward to that book then, Steve.
Yeah, that'll be the next one. We have one thing we just want to mention to you. Ket, Charleen, and myself at some point are hopefully going to have another sally at organising a bigger event around absurdity. And I'm going to drop in the chat a link to something which Ket is in a nutshell going to explain.
Yes. So after the very valiant but unsuccessful attempt at trying to run a face-to-face event on this wonderful topic, I think mine, Charleen, and Steve's desire is to just start to build momentum over time through conversations like this. So we would just want to gather your interest. Are you interested in doing some sort of face-to-face event at some point in the near future? If you are, please fill out and just lend us your name so that we can keep you in mind in the future. I have a really interesting offer that if we do a face-to-face, I'm going to try and create a pile of poo motif with some sort of animal upside down in it as a gift to everybody that attends. So if only to attend for that reason, then I suggest put your name down in the form. But yeah, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation.
So I can now retire happily, having infected Ket with this as an idea. So Charleen, Ket, thank you so much for coming and sharing your own absurdist insight. The rest of you, particularly, for coming and joining in this conversation. Not sure when the next one will be, but keep your eyes peeled. The recording will be out in the next few days, and I will email you all when it's there. And by all means, do with it what you want, and go and have a wonderfully absurd evening. May you find laughter